Hey, y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. Guess who I'm with again? It's Dr. Scott Walter. Thank you for joining me at pretty late at night, your time. So anyway, we today are going to talk about BMW and Figure's announcement, what the reality of it is versus the a little crazy, I don't know, the hype from the media, and also why it is a big deal, not just for Figure, of course, but for Tesla and for Agility and for all of the other robotics companies. It's again, I just did a video today. It'll be yesterday or something like that when you see this. But I talked specifically about how this is a gigantic pie and it's just going to keep getting bigger and bigger. So we're not talking about a sole winner by any means. There's going to be many, many winners in this space. Clearly, one of those looks like it's going to be Figure now. So thank you, Scott. What's your take? Do you want me to share the screen and read the press release first, or do you want to talk a little first? Or
why don't you go ahead and read the press release, and then I'll kind of give you my take.
Cool. So let me pop this up so I can see it because I can't see it through there. Okay, so Figure announces commercial agreement with BMW Manufacturing to bring general purpose robots into automotive production. Geez. PR Newswire, by the way. And this is dated the 18th, which is yesterday as we record this. So Figure, California-based company developing autonomous humanoid robots, today announced it has signed a commercial agreement with BMW Manufacturing to deploy general-purpose robots in automotive manufacturing environments. Figure's humanoid robots enable the automation of difficult, unsafe, or tedious tasks. Remember, that's the 3Ds, dirty, difficult, dirty, difficult, and dangerous. There we go. There's a tedious in there too. Sorry, man, I'm just totally blanking on that right now. But anyway,
Elon has a different one. He has like dangerous, tedious, and I think boring. Whereas Sandy was the 3Ds.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, so they're talking about the same thing here: difficult or unsafe, dangerous, or tedious, which is boring. So again, just like we talked about previously, like the fry cook. Anyway, and by the way, somebody sent along a picture of a thing called Flippy, which is super cool, which is a robot that is already in fast food restaurants. That's just it actually looks like a KUKA arm or something like that. That's on a little bit of a sliding thing. I don't know what company.
Hanging upside down, it goes around and does that. Yes, it's using a stereocabotic arm to do that.
Yeah, so very cool. Anyway, so throughout the manufacturing process, which in turn allows employees to focus on skills and processes that cannot be automated. Maybe we can talk about that. I don't think there actually is anything that cannot be automated. There are things that will take longer, but anyway, as well as continuous improvement in production efficiency and safety. Single-purpose robotics have saturated the commercial market for decades, but the potential for general-purpose robotics is completely untapped, and that's what we're talking about. If you want to call it a niche, it's not really a niche, it's huge. Anyway, Figure's robots will enable companies to increase productivity, reduce costs, and create a safer and more consistent environment, said Brett Adcock, founder and CEO of Figure. We look forward to working side by side with BMW Manufacturing to integrate AI and robotics into automotive production. Under the agreement, BMW Manufacturing and Figure will pursue a milestone-based approach. That's really interesting. In the first phase, Figure will identify initial use cases to apply the Figure robot in automotive production. Once the first phase has been completed, the Figure robots will begin staged deployment at BMW's manufacturing facility in Spartanburg, South Carolina, which is pretty close to where I live, actually. I drive by that all the time when I go to see my parents, by the way. Beyond the deployment of humanoid robots in an automotive manufacturing environment, BMW Manufacturing and Figure jointly will explore advanced technology topics such as AI, robot control, manufacturing virtualization, and robot integration. The automotive industry and with it, the production of vehicles is evolving rapidly. BMW Manufacturing is committed to integrating innovative technologies in our production systems to drive our future forward as an industry leader and innovator. The use of general-purpose robot solutions has the potential to make productivity more efficient, to support the growing demands of our consumers, and to enable our team to focus on the transformation ahead of us, said Dr. Robert Engelhorn, President and CEO of BMW Manufacturing. So there we go. That's a mouthful. One quick little note to people who don't know this. I used to write PR press releases for companies. And when they have maybe Brett said this himself, but I guarantee you that BMW, he didn't say it. Somebody wrote it for him. I used to write these things and I'd be like, blah, blah, blah. The CEO of this company said this stuff. They never say that stuff. You just fill it in. so these press releases.
However, they approve it. They approve it. So they approve it for sure. They come up with that, and in a sense, they may look at the email and say it out loud, and it's like, therefore, they said it. So that's going to be a very important point you want to come back to. So I think that a couple of points I want to make here is that let's go back to Wednesday, the day before.
Yes. Yes.
What was the general sense about humanoid robots? Because remember, we've seen a lot of people doing the valuation models of Tesla, in which they're looking at robotaxi, the part of that. They're even looking at Dojo as a service. It's like an important part of their thing. All of them are leaving Optimus out. And why do you think that is?
I don't know. That's actually a good
because
question.
No one's taken the humanoid robot serious.
Oh,
because for the most part, everyone just thinks, it's not really going to happen. They really don't believe it's going to happen until they see it happen. Okay.
Right.
As of this announcement, suddenly the humanoid bot, the idea of it is now been legitimized. Right. It's no longer some Tesla, Elon fanciful kind of idea, but boy, this now means it's going on. And this kind of reminds me of something of a book I read back in graduate school called The Soul of the New Machine by Tracy Kidder. And they looked at how the Data General computer was being built. And they talked about how the CEO of Data General had a poster up on his wall that was, it was an ad they were going to run, but because it was so edgy at the time, they did not run it.
Interesting.
But he loved it so much, he had it up there. And it said something to the effect of, they say when IBM's entry into the PC market will legitimize the PC. To that, the bastards say, welcome. Okay. Right. So basically what this has kind of done is it suddenly, through a similar kind of stroke right there, has legitimized the concept of the humanoid robot. The other thing, which I think is very similar to, is the NACS announcement last spring. And remember, like once that happened, they started falling like dominoes.
Yes.
You are probably going to start seeing more and more announcements like this, maybe with Figure, maybe with Agility and other companies. You may suddenly see VC money getting thrown into some new startups here and there.
Yes.
Or more than likely, some of the humanoid bot companies that are out there may be takeover targets for the traditional robot manufacturers, because suddenly they're going to be saying, whoa, this might be what's coming. This potentially could threaten our position. We need to have that. And the traditional robot companies have done that, because the cobots that are out there, they came up and they were kind of upstarts that were disrupting a little bit the normal kind of industrial robots. And they either started developing them themselves because they realized they needed to, or they acquired a couple of these companies are starting up, because it was pretty easy to start building cobots. So I think that means there's going to be a lot of changes going on. And there's a few other things. Now, one thing I want to mention, I have to be very careful what I say right now. I just finished doing a video with Herbert and Brett Adcock where we talked about this.
He got Brett? Oh, man, good for Herbert. I've been trying for a long time.
Basically, it's embargoed until Sunday when it comes out.
Gotcha.
I encourage everyone to look at it. It was quite an eye-opening interview, especially talking about this particular agreement. I cannot go into any details on it. All I can do is talk about what my observations were before I spoke with Brett. And more than likely, we are going to do a reaction video to that probably on Monday and Tuesday after it comes out, because there are some revelations in there that I think a lot of people are going to want to find out. So one of my first observations is that my other two startups.
Yeah.
Yep.
So go ahead. Just to be clear, I was not part of that interview, so I can make comments about whatever I think.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And I will say that Brett has been, since 2024 started, which is only 19 days ago, he has been very much like, we got big stuff happening. And clearly, I guess he does have big stuff happening. So yeah.
That's pretty big. That's pretty big. Yeah. So what I can do, and part of it is the speculation that Herbert Cern and I already made yesterday. Right. So I will kind of rehash and maybe articulate some of those points a little bit better. So back in my initial two startups, we were working with a lot of big companies, some obviously Fortune 500 companies, and we were having a lot of success. Things were going very well. And of course, our marketing team was always eager to get some sort of press release or something, or include it in our marketing material, stuff like that. Right. And you could never get these companies to agree to allow you to mention their name, or use their logo, or do anything like that.
Right.
And you
right,
always
right.
had to go through layers and layers and layers before you got agreement that you can go ahead and do this. So when I saw that yesterday, I'm like, whoa, BMW just lent their name to Figure. That is
Right.
big. That was not something that some junior manager just decided to go ahead and say, oh, go
Yeah.
ahead and do it. No, it had to go all the way up the chain. Now, you talk about, it's like, okay, so it was Dr. Roberts, what was his last name? So he was
Uh,
German sounding name.
Robert Engelhorn, president and CEO of
Engelhorn.
BMW Manufacturing. I mean, he's pretty high up the chain. He's the president and CEO of BMW Manufacturing. That's a big deal.
Manufacturing, which either may be manufacturing US or probably out of Germany. Okay, so very clear. He's up there. He cannot make that decision totally on his own. I mean, he's close. He's going to get right off from everyone else up there. The fact that he's making that means it is coming from someone up very top, which means they're really fully on board. And the thing is like small companies, small startups, we always want the big boys to come in here and allow us to be part of the cool kids club. And it's very, very difficult to get in there because they're like, look, you're just a startup. We're not going to do that. Now, it doesn't mean they don't make missteps. Let's remember the GM Nikola debacle. That did not turn out very well. That's something that should have been vetted better. But let's say it's not that BMW made a misstep. I'm not saying that. If anything, they learned from that and said, let's make sure we don't do that and let's vet these guys. Now, the other thing I could say is that Brett, the night before, said that, we're going to announce something that we've been working on for 6 months. Well, it's pretty clear what they've been working on for 6 months is that they have been talking to them. This was not something that they just decided on the 2nd or 3rd of January, hey, let's have a press.
Right.
They've been thinking the whole thing out, that they've got to the point that BMW is clearly comfortable enough to move ahead and make this announcement. That's why it is big. Now, the last thing I'll say is that if, let's say, there was something that BMW and Siemens were working on, they will always make those press announcements every day because you're talking about two big boys that, they're legitimate and everything else. So when you're talking about a company that's only 19 months old now.
That's crazy.
This is crazy. This is crazy. This is absolutely crazy.
Yeah. And I just wanted to throw in on top of that we're talking about BMW. If Tesla made an announcement, not that they would do this exact announcement, but if they made an announcement, they're a very different company culture than BMW. BMW is very German, very, conservative. This is not something that they, like you said, they didn't start on January 1st and say like, let's make a deal. This has been in the works. So
it's been in the work, and we could tell basically we have the public information there that probably was discussions going on for at least 6 months. And if you also look at the structure of it, they're talking about what those next steps are going to be, what they're potentially thinking of doing, going through the whole thing of looking at these case studies. And they've already kind of identified a couple of areas in there. I think in there, they mentioned something like there's 5 different set of applications they're looking at, something to do with pick and place, something to do with sheet metal, and now sheet metal. Okay, so sheet metal, what we're going to do is we're going to speculate again that they must be talking about feeding the kukas at the robot zoo. The whole idea of the body, because I think they even said it was going to be something like in the body shop. Well, sheet metal in the body shop, yes, you can have like loading and unloading of the presses, but that's already done robotically. There may be a little bit of sheet handling there, but for the most part, that's already automated. What's not automated is the pressings that you have that are stacked up in the dunnage and picking those things up and then dropping them in. And those are very straightforward. They're very simple. We've talked about over 2 years now. It's like, that's the low-hanging fruit. We expect that to be one of them. So I think we can read between the lines in there that that's probably one of the applications, something like that. The pick and place could be very much like the agility kind of moving pallets around and other stuff and sort of helping out because you always have dunnage to move around. And the other thing that Herbert showed is he showed some applications at that plant that look really easy to do, that they were still manual, but looks like, wow, that doesn't look like it would be that hard. The other thing that I think BMW mentioned I think either in that press announcement or it may have come from the one from Reuters and TechCrunch where they discuss this as well, is they said that the Spartanburg plant is the most efficient plant in all of BMW's plants.
Well, they built, that's a very modern plant. It was built while I was teaching at Clemson. They started building it. So that's 20 years ago. So it's very recent.
But what that means is that it's very efficient probably because they really figured out how to automate it. They've probably got a really good robotics team there. And so what you would think is that they may have the right skill set there to be able to start working with us. So when you're picking partners, you want to make sure you're picking a partner that you think really knows what they're talking about, that are going to be like the best of the best. And more than likely, it's like, well, why would they need it in a factory that's already the best? It's like, well, that's probably why, because they've got a good team there, and it may already be configured to be even easier to bring in the automation.
Well, I will also tell you, I was around when Clemson and BMW created this joint venture. And by the way, Brett or anybody at BMW, I'm 90 minutes from there. I am happy to drive over and tour the factory and look at all this stuff at any point. So just let me know. Anyway, but when they started this, it was specifically, it's called iCar. I think that's the relationship they have between the two of them. But it was designed to be a research type of, it's like a production facility, but also there's attached to it as a research facility in Greenville. And so it was very specifically designed to be very forward looking and to be a research type facility. So this is in my mind, as soon as I saw Spartanburg, I was like, of course, that would be the place that BMW would put it. It's not, 100-year-old factory that they're, kind of trying to adjust to. This was designed from the get-go to be a research and development type of active factory where they test out new technology. So it's perfect. Yeah.
Yes. Again, so it's probably configured that way, and it'll be a lot easier without any sort of reconfiguration or retooling or anything else, because you want to be able to just slip it right on in. And from some of the operations that are going on there, it looks like, wow, it is kind of set up to be a very smooth, very easy to do these operations. Ergonomically, everything looked like very easy for what the workers were doing. They weren't being stressed on doing some of these different applications. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to be able to follow that. So the next 12 to 24 months, which is in the time frame in there, is going to be very interesting to see how they progress, how they're able to ramp it up, how many robots are going to be there, what kind of applications are going to be going in. So if they've got at least, they're talking about 5 different application areas. Well, we know you're going to need at least 5 bots to go there, unless you're going to just be taking the same bot and moving around. But I think you would still want multiples on top of that. Not just one bot doing it, but several others. And so that means by the end of the year, they're probably going to have to be deploying a fairly good number of them down there.
So without talking about your chat with Brett previous to that, and I don't know if you found out this during the thing, but do you have any indication of who is manufacturing these bots? Are they doing this all in-house, or because there's a question of scalability.
They've mentioned they're doing it in-house. Wow. So there are other videos. I'm trying to remember who he had the video with. That was about 2 months ago, where they talked about they design their own actuators. Yeah. And they are building them in-house. Yes. And they're building a lot of, now there may be some components that they're outsourcing to do it, but for the most part, they're kind of like putting it all together, and a lot of it they're able to do. Okay. So, and that's just the nature of it, because everything is custom. So they have enough internal resources to be able to build what they need, and it seems like they should be able to at least hand build them at the rate that they need. It's obviously right now they would have to think about how they're going to scale up and what the manufacturing, but those are all things that you can sort of see from these plans that are going to be following up this as more and more bots are going to be available or need to be available, because there's going to be more and more people clamoring for it. So again, the feeling I had is like, wow, if BMW is doing this, are they the only one that's thinking about this?
Right.
Was it just them? Right. Or is it just the others are too shy or kind of afraid to do it? Because now I would think they've kind of broken that barrier. The stigma of talking about it is gone now. Right. So that means you might start hearing announcements from not just other automotive OEMs that have at least been considering it, or at least will be now, but probably a lot of other companies that are non-automotive that also are seeing the same things that we're all seeing everywhere, and that there are labor shortages, there's attrition going on, there's burnout, it's really hard to turnover that everyone's having with the labor market. You can imagine, it's like, well, how do you plug that hole? Right. And it seems like humanoid robots may be it, because a lot of the jobs that people don't want to do, they don't want to do it because of the 3Ds. Yeah. Simple as that. You go in there, you get a nice paycheck, But then after a couple of weeks, you're like, I've got to find another job.
Oh, the third D is dull. That's what I was trying to remember.
No,
Dirty, dull, dangerous. There we go.
Dirty, dangerous, and dull. Yeah.
Yeah. And for folks who think like, oh, everyone's just jumped ahead of Tesla and all this stuff, I think what you said at the beginning, this has legitimized something that people were not taking seriously previously, but the odds are very, very high that Tesla bots are active in the factories, at least in a training scenario. They may not be doing productive work, but they're come on, there's no chance. They're in Palo Alto. Fremont is 20 minutes away from their main facilities, and there's no reason why they couldn't have Tesla bots in there working. And
I'm thinking you get the S and X lines, which are not as advanced as the others.
Yeah.
So they do not use the gigacasting.
Right.
Because the gigacasting put tons of robots out of business.
Exactly.
Those robots were being manually fed. However, the body shop and the S and X lines are still the old-fashioned way. So there's still probably a lot of manual processes. I think my understanding is they're only running one shift a day there.
Yeah.
S and X line. Well, so it's not really high volume going. Oh yeah. So that means you get a second shift. You could easily be experimenting. And again, you're right. They're very, very close. So I would imagine they're doing that. But based on sort of this announcement with BMW, I would just have to say it's a horse race.
Yes.
Right now.
Yes.
It's a horse race. We cannot really say who's ahead and who's behind. Right. From the thing about the coffee maker demo is it's really hard to kind of parse that out. Should you be impressed or not impressed? I mean, some people were very impressed with it, and others are like, that's very easy. And we've seen other applications where I think another cobot did something similar to like that. I think maybe 4 or 5 years ago.
Right.
But what's important is how they trained it, and we don't have enough information about how they trained it. Brett's been a bit cryptic about that, as we've seen in those tweets. That 10 hours, we're not sure. We know it was video, and we know it was something video of observation of humans doing the task.
Right.
And from that, they're able to get a training set, and that seems to be pretty big. The other thing we know that he talked about a few months before is that his thesis was we'll have the hardware ready way before the AI.
Yeah.
And now he's like, well, it looks like the AI might be ready before the hardware.
Right.
And for me, it's like, I completely agreed with him on point one, But the second point here, it's rather interesting to see that the only way I could agree with him on that is for me to actually see what it is that he's seeing. And it's quite feasible he's seeing that because we are seeing it from other places right now that people are sort of shocked with what they're able to do with AI. And even within Tesla, that that it seems like something simple happened, that they tried something, and it turns out that version 12 may have been the solution they've been looking for, because they tried something they didn't expect to work, and suddenly it's working. And we don't know what that secret sauce is. We know it's end to end, but we don't know what the big thing is. And the same thing with what's going on at FigureAI. We do not know necessarily what the trick was that they did to get that end-to-end learning for that simple coffee demonstration.
Right.
But it is something that they feel internally is a big deal. And we kind of have to accept it based on that. And it might mean that, with that, it's very hard to handicap the horse race right now. I have no idea, who's actually in first and or not.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing that is important, though, is to because I think people are now going like, well, what the hell, Tesla? You've been working on full self-driving for a solid 10 years and it's still not there. But as I mentioned in my video that I did today, that I'll put a link to that at the end of this video so people can click on it, because I think it's worth, these are kind of like companion pieces unintentionally. But that full self-driving is the hardest thing to do possible. These robots, if you get a robot 99% of the way there, as long as it doesn't start swinging its arms out and hitting things or fall over, it can stop for a few minutes. It can just kind of crash and just be like, it will bring the line to a halt if it's not working, but it's not going to do anything worse than that. An automobile traveling 70 miles an hour can never fail. It has to work 99.999. So the reason it's FSD, I mean, I drove today to the gym, to the chiropractor, and then with my wife to lunch, and she was driving and she put it in full self-driving. All 3 times, no safety critical and disengagement, zone nothing. It works great, but the problem is it has to work not just that, it has to be that plus a couple orders of magnitude more, good.
It's the chasing the nines problem. So for the most part, it doesn't really fail on the highway. I mean, with normal kind of structures, things, it's absolutely fine. It's when you get into, some of these cities where things are a bit weird, the roads are a bit funky, a stop sign is hard to see, all these other things that it might make one of those safety critical things. The thing about a factory is extremely structured. The particular operation that robot is doing is incredibly structured, that it's much easier to work in that play space than it is outside. So getting the humanoid bots to work in factory settings is going to be very easy. It's going to be a little bit harder to get it in the general and where it comes into your house, for the same reason that FSD is like a little bit tricky, because everyone's house is a little bit different. It's not quite as structured and everything else. So we are going to see the humanoid bots being deployed and being useful this year really quickly, because the factory environment is so well structured that it's easy. It's like I said, if all you had to do was prove FSD on the track, and you've got the test track that's out behind the factory, and you've got all sorts of different curves and everything, you can get FSD to nail it 100% and get it to never fail. And however, we know it's like when you move from that test track to the real world, wow, it's like you realize how many nines you're going to take. The factory environment is basically the analog of it's just the test track. It's just working in there. But again,
but there's two other factors. There are two other. It's moving slow, and it only weighs like 120 pounds ish, something like that. So those two factors alone, even if you put it out on a city street right now, it would be safe as long as it doesn't start flailing, because it's moving slowly. The worst it's going to do is fall over and damage itself. It's not going to hurt anybody. So that's a really big, huge difference. Yeah,
absolutely huge difference. And the only thing is, like, it comes in the house and it falls over and hits a china cabinet or something like that. That's quite a disaster. So you want to make sure things like that don't happen, and that's going to be requiring a little bit of chasing lines. But you'll get the utility. A lot of people are wondering is that the thing with FSD, or at least the robotaxi, until it chases all those nines, it's really, people will argue it's almost of no value. I disagree. I get value out of a lot of other people, but for the most part, the consensus is it's not useful yet. But the humanoid robot will be useful way before it comes into our house, way before it's folding laundry and t-shirts.
Yeah. And so that's why I just want people to kind of understand that, because I think there's now this weird consensus opinion that Tesla's just been not doing anything and it's useless what they're doing. And just watch how fast Optimus, look how fast Optimus has already improved, not just the mechanics and the look of it and all that stuff, but the brain, it's so rapidly improving. And the reason why is because they already have all of this full self-driving architecture and thought and training and data pipeline, and all that stuff has been built over the past decade that they can just pump straight into Optimus, and it can learn. It will be able to learn and achieve what it needs to do much faster, as you were saying, because a factory environment is a very controlled environment. And worst case, you could put it in a cage while it's testing in testing mode, and just like not have humans interact with it. And then what could it possibly do? Yeah, I know, right? Put it in its own cage.
Yeah, the whole idea. We don't want to put the robots back in the cage, but yeah, you could be in the minimum. It'll be harnessed or something like that. So you'd be able to set that up, because it's going to be working in a very small workspace, which is what most of human workers do. There's very few that have to go traipsing around the entire factory all the time. It's like, oh, this is where you are, and you're just taking a couple of steps here, a couple of steps there, and you're doing it repetitively. So it just becomes kind of dull and tedious after a while, that you're just doing the same thing again and again and again. But that's going to be fine.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to automate.
Interestingly enough, I just did that video on Boxable, and we got to tour their factory, which was really cool to see. But at this point, Paolo was talking about, he was like, we haven't automated yet because we don't want to automate too early until we know how it works. But there were a lot of human beings doing things like mudding and sanding and just like and moving things around. That's the exact sort of situation where a general purpose robot would be ideal. You could teach Optimus or Figure or whoever to sand things. It's like, okay, here's a spot on the wall, sand it, mud it, whatever you want to do. It could learn how to do that. And it
Yeah,
just has to stand
absolutely.
there all day. It's just like, they bring in the new wall, the new part, and it goes and it sands it. And then they bring in the new part and it goes and it sands it. So that's a place where a humanoid robot could fill in right now and be flexible enough that you don't have to figure out how you're going to super automate this with big machines and all of that kind of stuff.
Exactly, exactly. And remember, go back to the algorithm, Elon's algorithm, where the first one is, the requirements, and going all the way
Right.
down the list. And the last one is basically like, optimizing the whole thing.
Right.
So in,
Right.
in a sense, bring in the automation at the very end is the best place to do it, because they haven't fixed the design yet. I mean, Boxable is
Yeah.
still tweaking a few things, and you
Right.
come up with this really hard tooling, and it turns out, oh, we've got to do something a little bit different here.
Right.
So that, I agree, that's one of those last steps. And the only way you can automate is you really have to understand the process. What are all
Right.
the steps that are going on? How are we optimizing it now with the humans? And now we got
Yeah.
that. Now we can start talking about where we want to optimize. Where's the best place to optimize? Because sometimes you'll go down to the factory floor and everyone's convinced you need to start with the automation here, and they put it in the
Right.
middle, and it turns out to be the wrong place.
Right.
And everything is a disaster. So they have to look at it holistically, decide where are the best places to do it, to put them in there, because sometimes you might need to be a little bit upstream, or you need to do something with your upstream processes to make sure the automation can handle it. Because if
Right.
the parts are coming in and they're not coming in the right quality or the right position, then suddenly your automation system starts to fail. So
Yeah.
you've got to get all your ducks in a row. You got to kind of look at it and sort of pick and choose where it's going to go, and of course, where you're going to get the most bang for the buck. And it may be that there's one particular area that's like really easy to automate, but boy, it requires a lot of physical labor, all these other
Yeah.
things,
Yeah.
and you really need good quality. You might say that's where it's going to go. We're getting a return on investment on that right away. And once we get that going, it's going to help all of our other processes downstream,
Right.
because now everything is nailed down exactly the way we need it to be. So I agree with what he's doing, is that that's the approach you have to take. Boxable is constantly changing things, I'm
Yeah.
sure. I think they're close to having a locked design, but it will
Right.
never be done. We know
Right.
that they're always going to be coming up with a new idea, a new kind of layout that someone's going to want to have. So hopefully they're able to keep a majority of what they have, just making little bits of tweaks. But until
Yeah.
they get there, yeah, don't automate too
Well,
early.
yeah. And it was interesting talking to Paolo, who's the CEO. He's like, I pay attention to Elon, and he was like, don't optimize too early, and figure out the processes first. But the really interesting part about this is, and I think what I was trying to say, but I didn't say it clearly enough, was that having a human form factor robot like Optimus, like Agility's Figure One, whatever, that robot, if it's a drop-in replacement for a human, you don't have to optimize yet. Because if a person can do it, in theory, these robots can do it too. And that means that you have more flexibility, right? You don't have to get to the point it's like, oh, we better optimize now because we need to do that to save money, or it's dangerous, or whatever that thing is. You can just drop a humanoid robot in there. And so in a way, you are able to optimize, but you still have the flexibility because it's still like a person.
Right.
So you can adjust that job where they're standing,
Yes.
exactly the angle of the wall, whatever kind of thing it is that you're adjusting, you can adjust it and it won't break the system.
Right. And it could turn out that if these bots are flexible enough, they may be sufficient for the automation. Right
Yeah,
now, your only
exactly.
choice is to go to some sort of hard automation, which could be
Right.
very expensive and kind of constrains you a little bit. And yeah, it might give you like incredible throughput on it, but the return on investment might take a real long time to get it. So
Yeah.
sometimes that means you're kind of almost locked into your product design, because you need to get the cycles out of it to justify what's there. But now you come in with this kind of more flexible automation that cuts the cost down, and you begin to realize, wow, we really don't need to do the hard automation. And if we need to get the extra throughput, well, we just create like another station and bring in a couple more bots because they're so
Right.
cheap.
Yeah.
So
Or
we just drop them in there.
if there is a spot, the beauty of it also is, let's say you've got 10 of these things you're renting or you've purchased, and you decide, oh, this spot does need hard automation because there will be an ROI for this. You hard automate, and previously those bots were there, but you just move them down to the next station in the liners, right? So they're flexible enough, again, that you're not throwing away that particular thing. They just move to whatever else they need to work on. So there's a lot of flexibility involved with this.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because a lot of times in those lines, you're not running that particular process the entire day.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of it. I was really surprised to see that. Back in the early aughts, working with a couple of aerospace companies that you think are really high tech and cutting edge, and one of them is like, they just got their first robot in. I'm like, what?
Oh my
I'm looking
gosh.
it's like it's 2010,
Let me
and
check my
you
watch here.
guys are just like, and it's like, why? It's just because our batch sizes are so small, we can't
Mm,
justify
mm,
it, and we have a
yeah.
process that we can bring a robot in there, and by 8:30 in the morning, it's done for the day. What
Right.
do we do the rest of the time? So they were trying to figure out how to make them deployable. So that's why they weren't doing it. So again, it will be the type of thing that we need some process that's over here. And so, yep, you send your humanoid bot over there, do everything. After an hour, okay, we've done everything we did. Now deploy somewhere else. Deploy somewhere else. So that's one of the beauties of it, and the reason why they're on legs is not
Yeah.
just because it's nice to be able to walk, but it means they are deployable
Yeah.
anywhere
Yeah.
you want. That is a key. Move to where the job is needed. And if you're putting on a wheels or a big cart or something like that, that means you have to reconfigure your workspace to be able to accommodate this big
Yeah.
thing that's kind of coming in that you're moving around. And yeah, we saw these aerospace companies were taking the robots and they were putting on these big mobile carriers to be kind of lock in over here, do something, move somewhere else, trying to get more utility out of that
Right.
one robot
Right.
that they had. So yeah, it opens
That's
up a host of possibilities because not everyone is running the lines nonstop from
yeah.
beginning of the morning to the end of the shift or the very end of the day.
Right. I even noticed that with Tesla when we did the Cybertruck tour in the factory, there was a place they were talking about some stamping parts or something like that, and they're like, "Yeah, we run this for like 4 hours a day or something because it produces enough
Yeah,
parts that they don't need it the rest of the day." So even with an
exactly.
incredibly efficient company like Tesla, there are still these places where it's like, well, now we have to redeploy our workers because we don't want them standing there for 4 hours doing nothing, right? They're not productive. But if you have a robot that can walk and go to another station, then same thing. It can go do something like
Yes,
that. So
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So you
Yeah.
see that all the time. There's going to be something that's limiting the overall throughput, but not all of them are, let's say, going to the same beat of the drum.
Right.
Some of them
Right.
are definitely going a lot faster, and yeah, their job is done really
Yeah.
quickly. So what do you do the rest of the day, the rest of the shift?
Yeah. And if you think about that, I don't if you have a fixed place robot with a big arm and tooling at the end of that, I mean, what are we talking about? A couple $100,000 to install that?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
I mean the end of arm tooling usually costs as much as the robot itself because a lot of
Right.
times it's very custom, and the robots, the low end ones for some cobots might be like high 20s, $30,000, but for the most part, the industrial robots are going to be 50,000 or more, depending on how
Yeah.
big they get, and then depending
Right.
on whether you've got to put it on track, you get all the safety fencing that might have to go with
Yeah.
it and safeguards, and then there's just the cost of the engineering
Right.
because the integrators have to figure the whole thing out, the programming and stuff like that. So by the time you get it deployed, yeah, you could easily be a couple $100,000
Yeah.
for
Okay.
just
But
automating
so,
one
then you think
process.
like, okay, so what if you put that in that stamping spot at the Tesla factory? It's like it works 4 hours and then it just sits there for 18 hours or 20 hours. It's just doing
Hmm.
nothing. It's like, well, crap, we're spending a lot of money on a thing just like sitting there. So again, a humanoid robot, if it can fulfill some of these jobs, I'm not saying it can, well, it could probably feed a stamper, but whatever, if it can fulfill this job, then when it's done with that job, it moves over to another station and continues working. So
Hmm.
much more efficient with your capital expenditure
Yes,
than a large
yes,
robot. So yeah.
yeah, yeah. So if you look at one of those spot welding cells, you know, maybe you're able to buy the robots at a bulk, $50,000. Then you get the end
Right.
of arm tooling, which is the big spot welding gun and all that. So you're almost showing another 50. So each one of them is about $100,000 total for that.
Right.
And then you have like anywhere from 6 to 8 in a cell.
Right.
Okay. And then
Yeah.
you've got the safeguards and everything else. So each one of those spot welding stations is pretty close to $1 million.
Right.
And you have a
Right.
lot of those stops along the way. So
Yeah.
that's why those factories cost several $billion to set up.
Right.
And remember, most of the cost is not the building. It's
Yeah.
really easy to erect that big building. I mean,
Yeah.
it's still kind of costly, but overall, it's the cost of the furniture that's going in
Yeah.
the house, not the
Yeah.
house itself. And and the fact
Yeah.
that you have to pre-order all these things, you have to make sure they're available, and it's not just something that you go to Amazon and click on it and expect it to
Right.
be delivered the next day. No, there's a lot of lead time on it, and that's why it takes a long time to build these factories. And again, most of the cost is the engineering that kind of
Yeah.
goes in that particular cell. So yeah, when I'm looking at this, like that was the hardware cost, and then we got to look at the integration cost that went on top of it.
Right.
So easily $1 million to sell easily.
Yeah. But so, to pull this back to Figure, I think we probably talked about this pretty well at this point. But BMW and Figure, the phase one of this, let me make sure I get this correct. In the first phase, Figure will identify initial use cases to apply the robots in automated production. And then this next phase will be begin stage deployment at BMW's manufacturing facility. So the first thing is just looking around and saying, like, okay, where can we get the biggest bang for the buck? What's the low-hanging fruit? What's the easiest thing for it to learn that at the same time will produce value for BMW?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think that's what they've done. So it sounds like they've identified those use cases. So there's probably plenty to pick from. And they went around and like, okay, where's the low-hanging fruit? They've identified the low-hanging fruit, and then staging, to me, sounds like you go in and you do like these proof of concepts. You demonstrate that it's able to do it. And you demonstrate that there is, let's say, a path to be able to make it useful or efficient. So the first thing you're going to see, like with Optus or anything else, it's able to do the task, but it might be kind of slow.
Yeah.
It's just not quite as fast as a human. And you can kind of look at it and say, yeah, but we demonstrated the capability is there. Now all we have to do is see if we can get it to be fast enough to get up to the point that it's useful. And useful is, in the end, means one very simple thing. How does it affect the bottom line?
Okay, yeah.
Does it reduce costs? So if it's able to do the task, but it costs you more than having the labor in there, then it's not useful. So the utility has to come from the fact that it's actually driving the cost down and is helping you in that area. And again, you don't want to optimize too quickly. So you don't want to say, we've got to have a robot that's as fast as the Flash. So we're like focusing on that. It's just going to be super, super fast.
Yeah.
And then, you spend a lot of time on that, but you can't demonstrate that it can actually do these tasks. So the first thing you need to do is figure out, can it do it? Let's demonstrate it.
Right.
And then start talking about speeding up. Because again, the Tesla bot, the folding of that t-shirt, that wasn't really quick, even though it was telerobotically done.
Right.
But, we have to expect that eventually it's going to get faster and faster. The walking speed is not quite where the walking speed needs to be. We know it's about 50% of where it needs to be, but it's not that big a leap. I mean, we're not talking about super fast speeds, 1.5 meters per second, which is right around 3 miles per hour.
Right.
They should be able to do that.
Yeah. And I think it was Stephen Mark Ryan did a 4x speed up of the bot folding the shirt. At that point, it was actually a little bit faster than humans. But so we're looking at somewhere between 2 and 4 times. So it needs to double to quadruple the speed. That's not an unreachable target. If you look at how slowly the Tesla bot was walking in the first instances to how fast it walks now, it's just basically doing that again, and it will be walking.
Yes. They need another doubling. Yeah. So it looks like they've almost doubled. But I think, based on what I saw, they got about a 30% improvement over what was the previous one, if my estimates were correct. So definitely the Gen 2 is faster than the first one by at least 30%. But we now need to squeeze out a little bit more. I'm almost getting a doubling out of that. So it went from about 0.5 meter a second to, I think, about 0.6, something like that, maybe almost 0.7. Right. So if we double that, then we'll be right at the magic 1.2.
Yeah. And again, and the same thing for folding clothes or whatever else it's doing. It's kind of like half-ish as fast as it needs to be.
The problem with the folding is it's not folding it efficiently. There's a better way to fold a t-shirt.
Well, that was on the operator. That's the operator's fault because it was.
It's on the operator. But again, so what's going to come down is whether the AI is going to learn those tricks. That if you go out to YouTube, you will find that there are some amazing tricks. So it just turns out that you grab the t-shirt at 2 specific points, and then pick it up, twist it around, and do this other thing, and bam, you're done. It's really fast. And that's what you have to start training these things. Or you hope the AI is going to be smart enough to figure that out on its own. Eventually, that it finds the best way. That's going to be really cool. But that's still a little ways away. But I imagine eventually Optimus will come into your house and will find what is the most efficient way to vacuum your house.
Right.
What are the tricks?
That would be interesting because I'll probably discover that I've been doing it wrong all these years. It's like, I should have done it that way.
We've been doing everything wrong. I mean, there's no doubt about it that there are a lot of things that I do that I thought was the way to do it, and someone shows it to me, and I'm like, How old am I now? And I just learned that today.
Just learn it. So, hey, never too old to learn. So thank you so much, Scott. And I will. I guess I can't leave a link yet because this will probably be out before Herbert's. But go to Brighter with Herbert and check. I'm going to be going to Brighter with Herbert and checking out Brett's interview with
On
you
Sunday.
guys because I'm
On
super
Sunday.
interested.
Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, pay attention to that. I will leave a link to my other video that I just did yesterday when this thing comes out. Anyway, everybody pay attention. Thank you again so much, Scott. It is very late at night.
When Herbert's video comes out, don't worry. We will be putting links out on X. So if you follow us on X,
there you go.
You'll be able to find out as soon.
And probably we'll be doing a reaction video to that video. So yeah. Okay. Anyway, so yeah, there will be many, many things going on. All right. Thank you so much. And everybody have a lovely day. Follow Scott on X and I will see you later. Bye-bye.
Yep. Cheers.